It was with the same idea that many kings were not allowed to die a natural death, but were ceremonially slain, so that their successors should receive their power and virtues before they had been affected by senile decay. Such was the price kings had to pay for attributing themselves divine qualities. Claiming to be the fountain of all authority, the law was supposed to emanate from them alone. Consequently, during the interregnum, which interregnum is I looked it up. That's when a country goes from one rulership to the other. We kind of saw an interregnum if you look at first no Second Samuel chapter 1, where King Saul passed and King David took up the banner after him. Which King Saul was going off and he killed himself because the Philistines was starting to get on his case and he was losing the battle. So he just thought it would be better just to kill himself than to be tortured and molested, because those Canaanites are pretty gay. So they you don't want to be dishonored in that way. The country lapsed into anarchy, and order was not restored until a new king was acknowledged. All this meant the suppression of traditional democratic government, which that whole thing is once again as up high, so down low. Which I'm not gonna say the full thing because it's very demonic. That whole thing, order out of chaos, ideal, and our people. That's a Satan. The devil today, they do that today. Where when we switch from one president to another, there's always that kind of little bit of anarchy. Not really, but you got people like, oh, we don't like this guy. When Biden came in, there was some anarchy. People didn't like that. Of course, going back to that quote unquote insurrection, which our people had no right to be there, but they're a bunch of dumb jakes. Sometimes Jake can be stupid. All this meant the suppression of traditional democratic government. To all appearances, the clans had been absorbed in the kingdoms. In the face of such a catastrophe, the West African gave proof of his political genius. He bent before the storm, but did not break. While on the surface the king carried all before him, underground the clans, still prevailed. Clansmen went to the clan chief to obtain justice. Clansmen saw to it that his judgment was carried out without hindrance. Clan chiefs continued to act as intermediaries between the living and the ancestors, regulated the economic life of the people. Doesn't that sound a lot like elders? And safeguarded the continually account life by periodical initiation of the rising generation. Which, of course, we had that. Our kings, our men, when the boy would get a certain age, around 13-ish, he would become and have his coming of age ceremony, and they'd form him and make him a man. The initiates formed themselves into a close phalanx under their chief, and such a body was called Poro. Poro is generally referred to as a secret society. Doesn't that sound kind of like the Illuminated Ones? But truth be told, the whole Illuminated Ones concept is really Canaanite in origin, and really that all goes back to Ham. So once again, they stole that from the Hamites, which is what this devil does. They just kind of steal things and put them together in a pot. America today is pretty much just the Babylonian mystery school system mixed with a little bit of Christianity and a little bit of biblical scriptures, but they just pick and choose whatever scriptures they want. Of course, if you start going into everything as us brothers at GMS do, they don't like that. But you can see that with the Bible, and these pastors saying, oh yeah, you can celebrate Mother's Day. On the Bible app, I have a Bible app, and it said, honor thy mother and thy father, celebrate Mother's Day, something like that. I'm like, wow. I mean, you're a Bible app. I mean, it's right there. You could just read it. Hearken not unto the ways of the heathen. No, do not. No. Do not learn not the way of the heathen. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. All right. The initiates for themselves into a close phalanx under the chief, and such a body was called Poro. Poro is generally referred to as a secret society, but it is secret only insofar as its meetings and rites are kept secret. Hold on, make sure yep. Secret are kept from the initiated and from women. Well, doesn't that also sound familiar? Priests and priesthood. I mean, we didn't keep everything secret, but don't you remember in Deuteronomy that people weren't supposed to go near the tent? Deuteronomy and Leviticus, people weren't supposed to go, in Numbers as well. People weren't supposed to go near the tent lest they die. If you weren't holy and sanctified and you weren't a priest, you weren't supposed to go near that tent. And if you did, you would die randomly. Of course, women too. Women were also kept from it. Unless they were, of course, doing a sacrifice, but they weren't just supposed to go in there and just hang out in the tent. That's going off. That's also the reason why GMS, we keep women from our congregation. But all this stuff is just through the Spirit. We know that we are these people. We created this society. Back in the day, in our past lives, we were in this society. Many of us were probably in functioning in this the secret society. Unostentatiously, the Poro functioned everywhere as an intrinsic, constructive, and regulative element of tribal life, and all the worldly and religious possessions of the clan centered in and emanated from it. It dominated all social activities. It recognized no frontiers of kingdoms, and pretended to acknowledge the supremacy of the king, only to be able to undermine it without hindrance. That sounds quite like the judges and the elders and the priests, does it not? Of course, they acknowledged the supremacy and the rulership as the king, but they also had the ability to undermine it as well. The ancient clan initiation was performed in Poro schools held periodically and lasting 4 years. Here, boys were educated and taught everything that a good clansman ought to know by instruction and the traditional rules which governed religious, intellectual, social, economic, and sexual life. Above all, the youngsters were impregnated with the duty to blind obedience to the Poro hierarchy. The Poro enforced by all possible means, including abduction, attendance of all boys of a suitable age, which is most likely around 13. That's around the time when boys get puberty. And thus impressed not only the children of clansmen, but also those of the usurper's family and henchmen whom it broke by merciless discipline and systematic instruction to submission to its ideals. They had to take the terrible... Hold on. Okay, 8 minutes. But also those of the usurper's family henchmen who broke it. Systematic instruction to submission to its ideals. They had to take the terrible oaths of secrecy in obedience to the Poro chief, and they left the school as his disciples and willing tools. Such a boy, should he in the course of time become king, was bound to remain subservient to the Poro. And when the white men arrived on the west coast, his revolution was an accomplished fact. And in the kingdoms he found, Poro, other bodies differing in name, but identical in character and purpose, had all political power in their hands. The king had become executive officer of the Poro chiefs, who surrounded him as royal counselors or placed into such position their own confidential men. Kingship had become a shadow without substance. Alright, I'm gonna close that and come